Good afternoon everyone, we are the group 1. So before I start, this video is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material. So we have objectives here. First, the student will know what is global divide. Second, to know what are the major histories of global divide. Third, to know why the global divides the North and the South. Fourth, to know what is the difference between Third World and Global South. And lastly, fifth, to know what is Global South and analyze how a new conception of global relations emerged from the experiences of Latin American countries. So, this whole topic is all about the global divides, the North and the South.
I'm going to report many part of our topic, which are global divide, the global south and north, and the history of it. So, did you know that global divide is also known as north-south divide? It is a global socio-economic and political categorization. The Cold War era generalization places countries into distinct groups. The global north is comprised of all first world countries and most second world countries, which are wealthy, developed countries. But the global south side is comprised of the third world countries or poorer, developing countries or at least developing countries. In the 1980s, the Brandt Plan was proposed by West German former Chancellor Willy Brandt. It was developed as a way of showing how the world was geographically split into relatively richer and poorer nations. Richer countries are almost all located in North Hemisphere. Poorer countries are most located in tropical regions in the Southern Hemisphere.
The origin of dividing countries into the North-South divide arose during the Cold War of the mid-20th century. During this time, countries were primarily categorized according to their alignment between the Russian East and the American West. Countries in the East, like Soviet Union in China, became classified as Second World countries. In the West, the United States and its allies were labeled as First World countries. This division left out many countries that were poorer than the First and Second World countries. The poor countries were eventually labeled as Third World countries. This categorization was later abandoned after the Second World countries joined the First World countries. New criteria were established to categorize countries, which were named the North-South divide, where First World countries were known as the North, while Third World countries comprised the South. What are the Global North and Global South? They are considered the richer or higher income countries such as Canada, European countries, Israel, and developed parts of East Asia except Australia and New Zealand. They are characterized by established democracy, wealth, technological advancement, political stability, aging population growth, and the dominance of world trade politics. They are the poorer countries or less developed countries characterized by a low level of economic development, large inequalities in living standards, and low life expectancies in Latin America, African countries, and developing Asia. They are characterized by a low level of economic development, large inequalities in living standards, and a low life expectancy. What are the differences between the Global North and Global South? The Global North has a smaller population. They are the countries with high wealth, high standards of living, high technological advancement, and high economic and educational development, and they are more industrial. While Global South has a large population, the countries suffer from high poverty and low standard of living. less technological advancement, and low economic and educational development, are more on agriculture. What are the reasons of the global divide? It is caused by the political power and economic dependency and the import and exportation of resources. The transition of industrial production to cheaper labor sources, international media, and expanding international trade and communication have in some ways made the world smaller, yet in other ways made the gaps between nations larger by creating greater dependency of poor nations to wealthy nations.
Why the global divides the North and the South? The division between the North and the South on a global scale can be attributed to various factors. One significant factor is economic disparity. The North, consisting of developed countries, generally has higher levels of economic development, infrastructures, and technological advancements, which contributed to their higher standards of living. The South, comprising developing countries, often face challenges such as limited access to resources, infrastructure deficits, and economic instability, leading to lower standards of living. Second is historical factors, such as colonization and exploitation of resources, have also played a role in shaping this divide. Many countries in the South are colonized by European powers, which resulted in the extraction of resources and the establishment of economic systems that benefit the colonizers. These historical imbalances continue to affect the socio-economic condition of the countries as of today.
Why the cultural divides the North and the South? Just first, third is a geography factor can also contribute to the divides. Certain regions in the South, such as those prone to natural disaster or lacking fertile land, face additional challenge in the terms of agriculture and structural and economic development. Fourth is political factor, including governance system, corruptions, and conflict can further exacerbate the divide. Stable and effective governance is crucial for economic social development. And countries with political stability of corruptions tend to face greater challenge in bringing the North-South divide. Third, addressing the global divide requires concerted effort from both developed and developing countries. It involves promotion fair trade, providing aid and environments, addressing history injustice, fostering good governance, and promotion sustainable and development.
The difference between Third World and Global South. Third World. Historically origin, Third World originally emerged during the Cold War era to categorize countries that didn't ally with either the Western Bloc led by US and its ally or the Eastern Bloc led by Soviet Union and its allies. It had a strong political context. Economic focus. The term was initially more focused on economic development and political alignment. In essence, the Third World had a strong political and historical context related to the Cold War geopolitics. And the Global South. Geographic focus, Global South is a more contemporary term that emphasizes the geographic location of countries, primarily those in Southern Hemisphere. Border inclusion, it's a broader and more inclusive term that encompasses not only economically developing countries but also emerging economies and regions that have historically faced various challenges regardless of their current economic status. While Global South is a more modern and geographically centered term that encompasses a wider range of countries facing global challenges.
The difference between the Third World and Global South. The term Third World and Global South are related but have different historical and typical connotations. Third World originated during the Cold War, was used to categorize countries based on their alignment with either the Western Bloc or the First World or the Eastern Bloc or Second World. Third World countries were typically those that didn't align with either superpower and often faced economic, social, or political challenges. It's important to note that the term was originally a political classification rather than an economic one. Over time, Third World has been criticized for simplistic and sometimes pejorative connotations, as it doesn't capture a diverse range of countries and their development stages. And Global South is a more contemporary and inclusive term that emerged as a response to the limitations of the Third World level. It encompasses a broader group of countries, primarily those in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania, which have historically faced challenges related to economic development, poverty, and inequality. Global South is often used to highlight issues of economic disparity, colonial legacies, and the interconnectedness of challenges facing these regions, such as climate change and global economic inequality. While both terms have been used to describe countries facing developmental challenges, Third World has more historical and Cold War era context, while Global South is a more modern and inclusive term that focuses on the global disparities in development and well-being. However, it's essential to use this term with sensitivity and consider the specific context and preferences of the regions and countries being discussed.
The Global South is a term that broadly comprises countries in the regions of Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Asia without Israel, Japan, and South Korea, and Oceania without Australia and New Zealand. This is according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, or the UNCTAD. The term Global South refers to a grouping of countries located primarily in Southern Hemisphere, often characterized by lower levels of economic development, lower income per capita, and a history of colonization. It's used to contrast with the Global North, which includes more economically developed countries in the Northern Hemisphere. So the Global South is also associated with various social, economic, and political challenges, including poverty, inequality, and issues related to development and access to resources.
We all know that global divides the North and South, but during the Cold War in the 20th century, that's the reason why the Third World made. So now, I will differentiate the Global South from Third World. So, let's get started. So, the phrase Global South refers to broadly the regions of Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Oceania, or should I say AALA countries that not align to USA nor USSR. Countries in the Global South suffer from poverty, lack of human rights, and the depletion of abuse and natural resources. While the term Third World was originally coined in times of Cold War to distinguish those nations that are neither aligned with the West or NATO, nor with the East, the Communist bloc. Today, the term is often used to describe the developing countries of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Australia.
Analyze how a new conception of global relation emerged from the experience of Latin American countries. The emergence of the new conception of global relation from the experience of Latin American country has been shaped by historical, political, economic, and social factors. This new conception reflects a departure from traditional power dynamics and the growing assertiveness on the part of Latin American nations in shaping their role in the global. Here is an analysis of some key aspects of this evolving perspective. First one is historical context. Latin American countries have a long historical of colonization, exploitation, and dependency on external power, primarily in European colonialists. And the later of the United States, this historical context has been informed their perception of the global relation, often leading to the desire of a greater autonomy and self-determination. Second one is economic factor. Latin America has been experienced the cycle of economic dependency on the global power, particularly through the export of a raw material. This cycle have highlighted the vulnerability of the region to the global economic fluctuation and understood the need for economic diversification and more equitable trade relationship. This has led to a push for regional economic integration exemplified by initiatives like Mercosur and Pacific Alliance. Third one is political movement. The region has seen the rise of left-wing political movement and leaders who have advocate for a more assertive stance in the global relations. A figure like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, Evo Morales in Bolivia, and Rafael Correa in Ecuador promoted the idea of Bolivarianism, the first century socialism, emphasizing the regional cooperation and independency from the United States. Fourth one is multilateral diplomacy. Latin American countries have increasingly turned to a multilateral organization such as the Organization of American States (OAS) and the Community of Latin American Caribbean States (CALEC) to address the regional issue. These forums provide the platform for Latin American nations to assist themselves collectively reduce dependency on external powers. Fifth one is shift in alliance. Latin American nations have diverse their international alliance while the United States traditionally been dominant influence in the region. Countries like Brazil have sought closer ties with other emerging powers such as China and Russia. This new partnership provide alternatives to the traditional Western-centric global order. Sixth one is human rights and social justice. Latin American countries have increasingly emphasized the importance of human rights and social justice in global relations. Movements for the justice, such as those seeking accountability for past human rights abuse and addressing issues like poverty and inequality, have garnered international attention and support. Seventh one is environmental concern. Latin America is home to the diversity ecosystem and natural resource and environmental concern have become central part of the region's global engagement. Many countries are advocating for sustainable development and raising awareness about the global impact of climate change given their vulnerability to its effect. In conclusion, Latin American countries have developed a new conception of global relations based on their historical experience, economic challenge, political shift, and evolving alliance. This new perspective emphasizes the regional integration, multilateral diplomacy, autonomy, and a focus on social justice and environmental sustainability while the challenge remains. Latin American involving role in the global relation is indicate of region asserting itself and seeking a more equitable position in the international community.